Welcome to this Learning Matters event. It's my great privilege to introduce you to the speakers. And I've got a cheat sheet which I'm going to share with you here. I'm not going to read it out. It's just staring you in the face that we have some fabulously talented facilitators who've designed a great event for us, and they are, they've got fabulous experience and a fabulous set of skills that will become apparent to you shortly. And I now ask Fee to perhaps start sharing her slides and look forward to a really positive event.
Thank you very much, James. Okay, I'm just going to be sharing my screen if that's okay. Okay. Sorry guys, just give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen, but it's a blank.
Yeah, which is very interesting. Sorry guys, yeah, that's the PPT. So I know, right, we've come back to life. So do excuse that. My name is Fee Hills. I'm here today with Chris Thorne. And as you probably already know, we're going to be talking about the principles of learner-centered virtual environment. In other words, really focusing on experiential learning and a learner-centered environment. We won't have time tonight to talk about designing experiential like learner-centered micro-coaching, but we will deal with the sort of whole facilitation and training thing. So first of all, I want to say thank you for having us here and thanks for attending. So in this 90 minutes, we're going to be doing a couple of things. One is we're going to give you an introduction to scalable learning through a learning-centered culture, and the other one is you're actually going to be going through some activities. So the first part should only take about 18 to 20 minutes, and the whole rest of it is actually you. So we're going to be experiencing some learner-centered work focused on some language of growth mindset. So we've given it a theme, as it were. And the virtual coffee house, just a little bit about what we're about, and that is we are a social enterprise to innovate different things like gamification, accelerated and scalable learning, really to do with experiential, either facilitation or indeed digital types of learning. And usually, obviously, in a hybrid workplace, hence the name Virtual Coffee House. So some of our work as a social enterprise is with workplaces, which is where it's starting out. And the other is obviously with behavior, accelerating behavior change and cultural change within communities as well. But that obviously comes later. Now, I want to start with sort of outlining what do we mean by scalable learning. So the next few slides really talking about that. And I don't know how much you know about scalable learning, but I'll just go over it. This really is about future-proofing our organization. So we're moving from scalable efficiency type environment where we've come from to more 21st century scalable learning and what that means. So it really is about developing a growth mindset, upskilling and reskilling our people with higher order thinking skills and lots of other skills that we need. But things like creative thinking, analytical thinking, critical thinking, so they are higher order. So it really is about acquiring, retaining that talent through that talent war, which is really hurting businesses all around the globe, in all industries at this moment in time. Really about harnessing the power of strengths from leadership right across the employee base, improving leadership skills, which is obviously a core skill, and building a foundation of mental and emotional well-being, because all of the other things in the list can't really be done if we don't have emotional well-being across the business. So it sort of sits on a bit of a foundation, we'll call it, right? So what is a scalable learning? What is scalable learning culture? Well, I want to start with the premise that it's a paradigm shift. And when we think about leadership and learning, so we talk about learner-centered, we are also talking about leadership. So doing the thinking for our people. So we're making that paradigm shift, where we've tended to design things that do the prescriptive outcomes, not just talking about learning, but also, of course, the way we lead in old style businesses, to facilitating people to think for themselves. And I think the point here is, what does that mean to training or learning and facilitation, particularly with this audience tonight, which is saying, okay, what does that actually mean to my design and to my delivery? How does that change what I'm doing? And, you know, how radical really is it? And the one thing I will say is it is quite radical, depending on where you're coming from. So we always start from the position we're at. You may have already been doing experiential learning, but this isn't just about experiential learning. There is a little bit more to it. So John Hagel's your man, definitely, is an American chap who, I was saying he's ex-Deloitte, if I'm not mistaken, very senior chap there. And he is also part of Singularity University, which is, and lots of other things. But basically, he's the guy that invented the sort of term of scalable learning. So he is the theorist of this, okay? And he said, developing scalable learning strategy is one of the most strategic things an organization can do, as it will be the biggest competitive differentiator in the 21st century, no more. So I want to talk about the principles that he shares, because they're not that complicated and they're not that hard to put in place if we understand the theory, right? So one is tacit knowledge sharing. So tacit knowledge meaning implicit knowledge rather than explicit knowledge, which tends to be much easier, and we can sort of systemize that. You can't so much systemize tacit knowledge sharing. So that's the knowledge that's, you know, very talent-based, intrinsic, or something I've learned over a period of done me 10,000 hours type thing. So we need to get that sharing of that tacit knowledge. But ironically, sharing tacit knowledge requires a psychologically safe space, which requires smaller groups, maybe under 16 people. So we talk about learning tribes. Now, smaller groups, because you immediately think scalable technology, but it's got nothing to do with technology, scalable learning. Not really, apart from the fact, you know, Zooms and things like that. It's actually about creating a learning tribe type environment. And the key imperative in this rapid changing environment is basically about, the second thing is about creating new knowledge together, ultimately leading to agile innovation. So that's the imperative. So it's tacit knowledge sharing, new knowledge creation. One really important thing to see where it's going, and when I say going, I mean it's there now, because of the pandemic has sped things up quite a lot. At the moment, and historically, the theory emerges from the practice. So we do the theory, we learn the theory, and then we go and put it into practice, whether it be a model or something else. That tends to be the way it works in workplaces and actually in education as well. What's going to happen, and is happening, which is why the move to experiential learning, is that the practice is first and the theory will come from the practice. Now, when I say that quickly to people, right, they go, hang on a minute. Yeah, and that's massive. That's a massive paradigm shift, because we're no longer worried about theory so much, but we're creating the theory out, the new knowledge from the experiential bit. So it really does change everything. So again, we ask ourselves, what does that mean to us if we're facilitating learning? What does that mean? Why learner-centered? But that is part of what we mean by learner-centered. The learner is at the center of the entire experience and reflection. So when we think about like psychological safety, so this is a good way for me sometimes to explain why we need to be learner-centered, and what it means is, in a psychologically safe space, there is no wrong answer. Hence, the theory or new knowledge comes from the practice or exploration, the experimentation, if you like. So our job as facilitators is merely to put people in some type of experience that has some type of constraint. The learning is not the experience. The learning comes from the reflection from the experience, and then the adaptation from there. So how does that I've just reflected on and I've just experienced adapt to my behavior or my skill within my business, within my job? So the reason we need psychological safety is we need to feel completely comfortable in that environment with there are no mistakes, there are no wrong answers. And we have to learn from that failure in some sort of controlled environment, because we could say all learning is experiential if you wanted to put it that way, but we don't always get the time to reflect on it. So hence why we create these safe spaces where people can reflect and they can transform and change. So everybody opens and shares ideas as we go around that nice green circle. This is from the World Economic Forum, I think. And we're able to make better, more innovative and better decisions because it's a comfortable, it's psychologically safe environment. People feel okay making mistakes, feel okay speaking up. Now, in the danger where we can be with information-based prescriptive ideas, so the sage on the stage idea, I mean, we still need that as well. It's not to say there isn't any element of that. Of course there is. There's an element of everything that remains, but we need a large section of it to be experiential, is psychological danger and fear of making mistakes because there's already a prescriptive outcome. So what I would tend to do is then get into this fear of, I would blame others because they had a prescriptive outcome. And then I'm less likely to share. And I'm therefore not getting any new knowledge. So we're not getting that tacit knowledge share, and we're not getting that scalable learning. We're not getting that new knowledge creation. We must have the new knowledge creation. It's so important. So we get that sort of common knowledge effect, and off we go around again. So I hope that makes sense on that one. Now we might be asking, definitely, I sound like a nurse, hold on. We may be asking, they go, how are we today? No, how? You might be asking, well, how? Because that is the biggest question. It's all very well saying how to get learner-centered, and it's all very well saying I need scalable learning. But what I really want to know is how to do it. I want to know the practicalities of it, especially as a trainer. So 3 keys to hybrid scalable learning culture. One is environment, like location, environment. So it's the environment that I set. As a leader or a learning practitioner or designer, I have a control over that to a certain extent. I don't have any control. I maybe have control over who I take into the business, and I have control over how I design the environment, the leadership and stuff like that. But after that, I really have no other control, especially in an exponentially changing world. So the environment, we're really talking about things like psych safety. We're really talking about a coaching type culture, feedback, proactive feedback, not reactive feedback. So really changing the things that can get us feeling open, honest, authentic, and all of this sort of stuff. So that's the job of the leader, but it's also the job of the learning. The learning, obviously, they're controlling it in a learning way, and the leaders are controlling it in the teams. So the second thing is that growth mindset, which is a continuous basis of work, really, to be honest. And then the third thing is the skills and tools. So how do I develop the skills, and how does the company develop the skills quickly, accelerated, and scale that to overcome this talent war challenge? So we need those skills and tools, but we can't get the skills without the growth mindset and the environment. So they are like a bit, somewhat like building blocks, as it were. So that there's a lot of paradigm shifts at the moment, as I'm sure you know, but a paradigm shift of experiential learning and facilitation rather than, should we call it, training, for want of a better expression. It is still training. I still call it training in and out, but it is more facilitation. So we're moving from that trainer-centered, which is basically more about information and prescribed, this is good, this is bad, outcomes, and more towards the learner center where the pure learning, so it's less work for the facilitator, because once you go into the experiential space, they're really doing all the work. You just set in a bit of an activity and it goes where it goes. That has an upside and it has a downside, because you have no control over it once you've set them the sails going. You create the environment, you do your best to get them all going, and then you have to facilitate it through, as you know, because you've probably all done loads of facilitation. But when it comes to learner-centered, we're getting them to play games, or we're getting them to play activities. But either way, we can't say there's a right or wrong answer. So the control is with the learner. Now, in order to do this, we need a methodology. And this is a good time to say that when we go to move, let's say, this is a good thing about hybrid in a way, we might take learning that we did in a face-to-face environment and lift it and shift it into a virtual environment. That clearly doesn't work. It's a good short-term fix, and it's sometimes the only short-term fix. We don't have time between pandemic coming and designing material. We have to do whatever we can do, and we try and do our best to make it more interactive, because interactive training isn't experiential necessarily. So what we first need to look at on a longer term basis is the method first, not the technology. The technology is really third. So it's like method, blend, because obviously we've got to blend to ignite and then embed and then sustain the change. It's method, blend, and then the technology. And then it passes across to the technology really well. So the technology becomes the tool, if you like. And we've developed a method. Our method has been used a long time, and it's been validated on about 35,000 people. Is called EPIC. And it's experiential, playful, iterative, and collaborative. We don't necessarily use all those things in every design. So if you've got digital micro-coaching, experiential, you have experiential and iterative. It wouldn't be collaborative. But equally, we'll always use one or two of them in each section of experiential learning. If it's gamification, you could be doing all of it. And so forth. But it is really for rapid transformation. The reason you need iterative is because for habitual change. So we intermingle between these two things, for want of a better weird expression I've just made up. So the activities they're like a structure. I'm going to show you an activity because you're going to be playing them out in a second. But there are some considerations with this type of work and designing the activities. I mean, we designed about 500 or whatnot, but it's you know, they're tough. They're not tough to design. It's more about that sort of the concept, and then you've got to test them and things like that. So they take a lot of creativity and a lot of directional writing. So you just need to understand the process. But basically, the considerations in this type of work is context and understanding, creativity and innovation. So this is what we're trying to evoke every time we're playing something out. That you've got measurable learning outcomes. Now that sounds a bit contradictory because we say we don't predict the outcome. You predict the overall transformation. So if we're doing growth mindset, we'd say, overall, I want to improve the growth mindset of this person. How I get there, that's up to them because it's learner-centered. But you do have learning outcomes, but they're more about change. They're more about performance rather than did you tick that box or get that skill or whatever. Levels of participation, so you've got to design with that in mind, and logistics and time available. So you could have one activity that could take an hour and you can have one activity that takes 5 minutes and it's the same activity. So you design according to the need. So it makes everything massively flexible. And one of the issues with being massively flexible is it leaves the thinking about it up to the learning facilitator or trainer, which also makes it quite challenging in that way, because it looks really easy. And to a certain extent, it's straightforward. So if you've got an activity design, you've got the name of the activity here, then you've got what is it? It's a group, it's rewarding relationships there to develop that. And each activity, for example, that you design when it's experiential, you could reapply to 100 different applications. So that differs as well. And that makes it, you have to know the resource, right? Because you could use this activity in 100 different ways, in 100 different ways of playing it out. And that's okay with experiential learning. There's plenty of room for creativity from the learning facilitator or trainer themselves. So you've got a setup, the teaching point, that never changed. The setup may change whether you're doing virtually or face-to-face or walking workshop or whatever it may be, themed, whatever it is. As it's part of a bigger event, it would be played out differently. And then you have directions of play there. And so this is how you play it out. Now, is that prescriptive? No, you can change it. And people always change it, because learning people are creative normally, and they tend to want to get creative. And that's fine. Remember, that's just the experience. The learning is really in the reflection on the experience. So you can get creative with the experience, if that makes sense. So on that note, we've got a couple of minutes if anyone does have questions before I pass over to the lovely Chris. And if you do, come off mute, and more than happy to answer any questions on that particular subject. No one said anything, so I'm going to move on. So Chris.
Yeah, I think they're just all waiting to, they're excited to get stuck in, I think, aren't they? And see how this all works in practice. So we've put a bit of a theme around the activities this evening for you. So we've called it the language of growth mindset, because we're all about helping to accelerate and scale behavior and culture change. And one of the most important ways that we scale change in an organization is through the conversations and the language that people use in those conversations on a day-to-day basis. So we've chosen some activities that speak to that theme around language, and we're going to just play them out, and then obviously take questions and answers more towards the end. Obviously, as you're all trained facilitators yourself, we'll be inviting you to just kind of chip in and jump in and ask questions, and no need to sort of type in the chat and all that sort of business. So for this activity, what I'd say is go ahead and take yourself off mute if you do want to jump in, and we'll set the scene. So our warm-up is called butt power. Now, butt is one of the most powerful but misunderstood words in the English language, because what happens is when we use the word but, it negates whatever we just said before we said the word but. So if I'm trying to give someone a piece of feedback and I give them that positive feedback and then I follow it with the negative feedback, what's happening? What do you think is going to happen? I'm going to trigger that stress response on. I'm going to trigger that, oh God, what's coming? Is it good news? Is it bad news? What would she think? Well, it's bad news, isn't it, for them, not me, because I'm the one delivering the feedback. So let's just see how this plays out in practice, and then see how we can turn the but to our advantage. Sophie, I'm going to ask you to be my demo assistant, if that's okay.
As long as you're nice to me.
Well, I'll try. I'll do my best. Okay, so we're going to have a bit of a scenario here. So I'm a team leader, and I'm giving feedback to Fee on a report that she's done recently. Sophie, can I have a word?
You can.
Well, okay, great. Listen, Fee, that report you did last week, it was really great. There were some really great ideas in it, very creative, really liked it. But now what do you think is coming next? And please feel free to just unmute, say what you think. Don't feel shy. Don't have to raise your hand. Just shout it out. What's coming next?
I think you're going to give her now negative feedback, as in, but it could have been better. It wasn't exactly what I wanted. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay. How do you think she might be feeling right now?
Nervous.
I'm crying.
He says it all.
Oh, crying. Oh gosh. I must have sounded really harsh then. I have to dial that down. Oh, okay. So yeah, so you can see I've triggered that response. And so let's try and play it a different way and see what the difference is. Sophie, can I have a word?
You certainly can. I hope it's better than last time though.
Well, I've gone away and I've done a bit of learning and personal development since our last conversation.
Excellent.
And I'm learning some new ways of giving feedback. So listen, you know that report that you worked on for me last week, and I know you put a lot of hours in on that. You know, I've looked back over it. Fee, actually, you know, there's quite a few spelling mistakes and there's a few grammatical errors and things, and I need you to fix that before we send it to the client. But, and what do you think is going to happen next?
You're giving positive feedback in there. So I think it makes me think there's more praise that's going to be coming, or you're going to acknowledge the hard work that was already put in.
Oh, that's a good point. I meant to sound it was meant to be all negative.
Yeah, that was negative.
Say that you're going to say, but overall it was good.
Oh, okay. So, but
tell me something nice.
It was one of the most creative and best pieces of work I've seen you do this quarter. So well done, you.
I feel better. But at least my self-esteem is still intact, at least.
Is it? Oh, that's good.
Well, I'm not crying anymore.
That's great. That's great. Look, I mean, and you know, what else did you notice? Did anyone sort of, you know, look at her face or body language as I was giving the feedback? You know, what did you see there?
Leaning into the camera.
Leaning into the camera. Okay, what does that tell you?
I did. I felt myself go like, yeah. Didn't I? I did that. And you know what? I didn't mean. I was a bit more, okay. That was interesting, actually.
I think, Chris, your tone was softer as well in the second.
Okay. Well noticed. I mean, what sort of difference do you think that might make?
That it's not so harsh in terms of it's not going to be so critical, because it's a more friendly, softer tone.
I mean, I mean, that's a great point that Sue made, isn't it? So it's not even just the language and the actual word that you use. It's obviously the delivery, isn't it? It's my tone of voice. It's the pace. It's how do I, you know, it's my eye contact with Fee. There's all those things that go into making that conversation have a whole different slant to it, doesn't it? And obviously by getting people to be more conscious of these differences, then I mean, think of what kind of an impact that could make if people felt a bit more positive, engaged. If you give feedback like this, as opposed to I'm sure most of you have heard of the feedback sandwich, haven't you? Where we've got, you know, the positive, the negative, the positive, because we're trying to sort of almost hide that negative feedback in there in the hope that they're going to pick up on the sandwich either side and leave feeling okay. But actually they know what's coming. I think this is kind of a tried and tested model that we've all kind of, oh yeah, they're giving me that thing again, you know. And so flipping this around, it kind of makes people pay attention a little bit, isn't it? Because they're not expecting it. And any other observations before we hand back to Fee, and we're going to explore a little bit more around the impact of the amygdala hijack that's come out of this. Oh, I love Ronnie's screensaver. He's a corgi. Sorry, I'm a bit of a dog fan. I just noticed that. Sorry.
Oh, cute.
I think it's an interesting paradigm shift of taking the but, which people anticipate as a negative thing, and then flipping it around and using it as a tool to reinforce the positive piece. I think that's an interesting paradigm shift.
Great. That's a great observation, Stephen. Yeah.
It's just to support that as well, because that's right, that pick up on that. So some people say, oh, is that like the feedback sandwich? And think feedback sandwich is a tool or a method, whereas this is using language properly, because the but negates everything before it. So why would you give the positive first? Because they know what happens actually, which is a good point Chris making there, that the moment your amygdala is hijacked, so I say but, your brain is a predictor of information. The faster you predict, the more intelligent you are, like Einstein's quick predictor. He's not here. So you can understand what's happening. The moment it hears the code, but it knows that's coming bad news is criticism. It knows before you know, it's unconscious. So what happens is it immediately shuts down that prefrontal, blood goes away from it. I mean, unless you're trained otherwise. So immediately you can react, and therefore they're not listening. So the sound, the first thing that goes is hearing. So not listening to the feedback you've given them as the constructive feedback, which is negative. So you do the feedback constructive first. By the time you do you're not getting that amygdala hijack. And then you're leaving their self-esteem intact. So there's so many benefits, but it's actually the proper use of the word but. It is because it's there to negate what's before it.
And if you were facilitating this, like in a workshop or an activity, you know, by putting people in that experience, and of course, what you would ask them to do is be to pull out a real life scenario that they need to play out with somebody. And by getting them to kind of play that through and actually notice and observe the difference in the different reactions, the way they play it, you're in effect putting them in that experience, and they're making sense of. So I mean, I could tell you, oh, well, do it this way as opposed to that way. You know, put the but and then put the positive, put the but, and then put the negative. That doesn't mean anything until you've actually experienced and you've actually seen that it does make a difference. It is impactful, and you've tried it out and experienced it for yourself. It doesn't land, and you don't make sense of it, and you're far less likely to take that away as a behavior and try it out and embed it in your own culture. So with that,
it's easy to do it as well, isn't it? It's pretty easy once you get used to it. I think it's a little bit of a skill. Like I could see myself saying, is it negative first or positive? Oh, what was it? Oh, never mind. Right, and do it wrong. So it takes a little bit of practice, I think, like any of these things. But give it a whirl, see how it works. That's what I say. So
Sorry, would this be also something that would be a coaching versus a feedback session? That would be those distinct parts there as well?
I mean, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Yeah, you can use tools like that, language however you like, whatever serves you. So I would use it in coaching. I mean, I'm not a coach, one-to-one coach, but I would say. Do you think?
I would say I potentially could, because I am a coach, and yeah, I mean, if I was trying to coach someone through having a conversation with someone, I mean, the way I like to coach is that sometimes, as appropriate, I might pull in a model or a tool or something like this, and then get them to try it out and explore and see what they think, and if that's something that could work for them. So yeah, potentially you could argue that it's a bit of a coaching style, and it's certainly a coaching type conversation, isn't it? Yeah, great point, Shirley. Thanks.
Could I just add a quick comment that one of the tools in experiential learning is what we want to do is create the indeterminate situation. And by doing the but, what you've done is you've flipped it. So then our normal reaction to those things doesn't apply anymore. And so what you've done is you just cleared the runway.
Yeah, it's a good point.
That growth mindset.
That's a such point. I don't know that point. Can I use that point? Would you mind if we use that point? It's a good one.
Indeterminate. Yeah, no, I love that.
That is a really good. Yeah, it is a good point. I didn't even think about that, to be perfectly honest. But there's another game called Yes But Flip, which is really good because it flips somebody who says yeah but, and you flip them. So, and you get you sort of experiencing whether they're sort of making an excuse or a reason, and by testing it, it's like a validation tool, which you can't go into now, but it's a really good warm-up, because what it does is get people thinking about language. So as you're going into something with language, which the main thing about behavior and cultural change is you're going to have to change the language, and the only real way of changing organizational language is through experiential learning, because you can't pick it up any other way. It's like you can't embrace it any other way quickly. So we want to accelerate and we want to scale. That's why. So if you use language, that's the code of the mind. So if you're using that code and then reframing one by one, that's the iteration bit, one by one frame, you're changing the mind to change the brain over time. But what you're also doing from an organizational point of view is you're changing the organizational language. Because once they learn it internally, they express what they learn internally, externally in meetings and things like that. So you're changing a frame at a time. So you don't try and chunk up too much. So if we're using the but, that's all we're learning, right? You can't take a big chunk of learning and do it in 1 5-minute warm-up, right? But that's a tendency to try and put too much in. Whereas the next activity we're going to is called, is it the trains of thought, this one?
Yeah, that's it. And the only last point I just add is, did you notice that we took longer to reflect on the learning than we did to actually do the activity? And that's one of the key differences in what we're doing here with the experiential, is that the activity is just an excuse to then have the reflection of the conversation, but you'll notice that we spend longer on the other side than we do in potentially the activity. So B.
Yeah, and that it's a really good point you just made. And also, like what we're looking at in a lot of this stuff, and it sounds, Stephen, like, and many of you might have done experiential learning and stuff. So what we're really looking to do is improvise. So it's a lot of improvisation, and that takes a bit of getting used to as well. I mean, I like improvisation, but if somebody doesn't like improvisation, they feel like it can be really quite nerve-wracking. So you're better sticking to the directions. Whereas some people I literally get ready when I used to do the face-to-face events, get ready and completely tray and go, yeah, practice. Oh God, I know exactly what I'm doing. Yeah, get in, chuck it out. And literally go whatever happens in the room, because it is experiential learning and we have to be willing to go with the audience. And that's very difficult coming from sometimes training. It's not difficult, it's a challenge, but when you actually do it, you find that in the end it's easier because you're working with the audience. And it's in some ways that's very learner centered, it's very easier. So anyway, you guys may have already done all this, so I don't want to like teach granny to suck eggs. So right. So are we happy to, if I just share this next activity, are you ready to move on? You want to? Yeah. It's called Trains of Thought. Now, for the purposes of this, I am just going to share a few slides, just going into it, then come off it for the play, which is, you can see why I'm doing this, can't you? Not I'm doing this, we're doing this. The reason we're doing this is because really, as much as possible, we do not want to be sharing a screen. If possible, I wouldn't share it at all. But of course, that's not always possible. So let me just give you a bit of the context. And again, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing here. So what I'm doing is I'm explaining enough context so that when they go into play, it doesn't seem silly. Because some games can seem, and some activities can seem silly if they don't know why they're doing it. So why we're doing this is we want them to explore something. So we've already working on a theory. So we may use a theory that's already proven. We might use something in neuroscience. We'll basically cut it down and build it back up as as an experiential activity, and then say this is the work of this person. Blah blah blah. So emotions are primal. They create biochemical reactions in our body, as we may know, and that chemical reaction alters our physical state. So that's pretty much what we would have done with the but. The moment we said but and put a negative after it, we knew it was coming, we get that amygdala hijack. So the fight, flight, or flop, and so it goes on. Now, the difference between feelings and the emotions, because they're not the same, is feelings are more about our internal communication. So it's telling us what's going on. So it's saying, okay, we've got the energy in motion, the emotions, and then we've got the feelings. Is that this is the internal dialogue, what is going on, usually deep in the subconscious, of course, to a particular emotion. So if emotions are like energy in motion, they're designed to move us into action. So they're really, really important. So the trick here is how we help people with language to help them manage their emotions. And for a start, we've got to give them a bit of context to help them understand what's happening. Now, some people already know about the amygdala, but, you know, a personal emotional stress response, we explain what it is to a perceived threat that is sudden and overwhelming. So it's basically an amygdala hijack. So it disables the frontal lobes and it activates that fight or flight. So when I say it disables the frontal lobes, what it's actually doing is moving the blood away from that, because you don't need to think, reason, and use your reasoning skills and all that sort of stuff, or social skills, when you're up against it, when you're under threat. So it automatically moves the blood away from there and away from the digestive system, because it doesn't need a 3-course meal when you're up against it. And so it puts all of the blood very, very quickly within a nanosecond to the extremities, so your arms and legs, and ready to run a fight. So it absolutely makes sense. Yeah. Why is that so disabling? Now, one of the problems is we're having amygdala hijack how many times a day now? So this is causing this drip feed of really bad chemicals flowing around our body. We're constantly feeling under threat. If somebody looks at us wrong and stuff like that, did we do something wrong? Things like that, but feedback, when they did it the other way around, things like a feedback sandwich, when, oh, I know what's coming, right, I've done something wrong, can cause that if we don't help people develop their emotional well-being. So what's thoughts got to do with it, and what can we do about that to start managing those thoughts? And thoughts and emotion have a profound effect on each other, of course. So one thought can trigger an emotion, which then changes how we feel as state. So they serve as a sort of appraisal of the emotion. Now, that's why if we can build some mindfulness in between stimulus and response, what we can do is start to change those thoughts. We can start to manage those thoughts to change, and so forth, that chain reaction. And we can appraise and manage, at which it ultimately has a really good effect on, you know, how we feel. Now, what's good here is that you see that sort of white, that sort of, what would you call it, a river, or what do you call that thing in the background? I can't think of a word.
Waterfall.
Yeah, I would, that, you know, that is exactly what's happening in our mind at times, especially now, and especially the last couple of years as well. So, and that modern world is constantly debilitating, and it's constantly giving our people that DIY lobotomy. Is that safe? No, it isn't safe. So our job is to help people make that safety psychologically, so that people can perform better. They can learn better, they can perform better, right? And all of what we're doing here is helping them obviously build that over time. And there's different ways of doing that. So how do you treat your thoughts on that note? Are they uninvited pests, or are they a welcome guest? How are your thoughts? Now, of course, they can change from day to day, of course. So, or also another thing to think about through this is, are your thoughts focused on obstacles or on opportunities in general as a default position? Would you say? Ask yourself these questions as you're going through. So what we are going to do is we're going to play trains of thought. And I tell you what I've done. We've actually combined a couple of activities here, which I'll explain in a second, which is quite funny. Now, this is based on the work by Alicia Goldstein and Bob Stahl. And they wrote a book called Daily Practices of the Heart Mindful-Based Stress Reduction, right? The Heart of Mindful-Based Stress Reduction, sorry. And it's really about being curious about how our mind is and how we judge others. So it's a really good read. Now, we've got to notice, so this is where we go into the experiential bit, let's become aware. So step one is, how do we help people become aware of their different states, or whatever it is we want to make them aware of? And then being curious about how our mind works by labeling them. So that's not new. But we've got to widen that space between that stress response coming in and our reaction to it. So that's what we're developing before we can even start developing a type of growth mindset. Now, the reason we like their work is because it's quite a good track of thoughts, the way they've built these sort of 4 categories. Negative thought tracks, we've called it train tracks because it sort of makes sense, or trains of thought, which is catastrophizing the what if, that thing going around in your mind, this internal dialogue, worst case scenario, what if this happens? And it amplifies obviously anxiety and ultimately depression as well. The blaming, the I'm not empowered, mind trap, sort of uncomfortable feelings of holding onto the pain, where we perceive the issue is outside ourselves, somebody else or something else has caused it, right? The rehashing, the rumination, when our thoughts sort of reflect on past circumstances, going over and over again, often in an effort to figure something out. And then the rehearsing, which, you know, have a think and think, do I do any of these, right? I mean, bound to some time. But the mind is practicing for the future event. Dangerous game, this, where you playing through the scenarios again and again. Let's say you've got something to say to someone and you're going to have by the time you've gone in, you've already had the argument in your head and out it comes gushing. So it can end up with a preconceived sort of self-fulfilling outcome if we're not careful. So these are the 4, okay? This is the marker. And I'll explain this, and then we're going to give you the statement to go in the breakouts, if that's all right. Now, this is where we've mixed 2 activities. We've used the judging of another activity that does organizational language change, right? And we called it Sizzler. And it's always a blast, right? It works really well. And the raw sausage is raw language. It's bland language. It's uninspiring. It's non-compassionate, and it will not motivate anyone to do anything, and it certainly won't engage people, right? The cool sizzler, on the other hand, that's really where we want to be, but that's got a 1 to 5 marking. So the 1 is you just got out the raw sausage. You just made it. The 5 is Nelson Mandela, you knocked my socks off. Couldn't believe it. I'm so inspired. I'll do anything you want me to do, right? So we think about sizzling up language in any way, shape or form. So this could be, yes, for influencing, for leaders, but it can also be for customers. So it could be for anything to do with language. And the burnt sausage is when it's inauthentic. I did not believe it. I did not buy into what you said. Now, we use this a lot for emailing around companies. If you want to ruin culture, email people and then send an email late at night to about 5,000 people all at once that you haven't quite read before you've actually sent it to see whether it meets the mark. So you might be saying, oh, well, what sizzler then? What sizzles it up to a 5? And it isn't just about making it sound right. This is not like about being inauthentic. This is must-haves. So this is the goal of what we're going to do in the room is, let me just move that so I can actually see, is must have a motive. So your language must have a motive. So we're going to give you a raw sausage, you're going to sizzle it up, and it must have a motive. It must evoke compassion or collaboration or both. So if you're doing it with your self-internal dialogue, it's going to be more compassion, isn't it? But if you're doing it as an organizational language, it's more collaborative. So it evokes collaboration. So these are the indicators. And the other one is it must inspire and not tire. So does it inspire me to want to follow you, to take action? So a good one to practice on at work is emails, because they're dreadful, some of them, right? So train of thoughts, the raw sausage, give you a couple because we're working on it with a bit of an internal mindset here. So we're working on internal dialogue, which is obviously different. I've tried so many times to get ahead, but nothing ever seems to work out for me. Sometimes it feels like I take 1 step forward and 2 back. This is sounding like me, actually. So why do bad things always happen to me? I've had an interview this week. I know I won't get it. I feel like, so we're on a completely negative train of thoughts. There's a mixture of the 4 there. So now, what we've done to make it easy for you and quicker, and in page 3, you're going to see it, is the mission of your teams that you're going to break into is to turn the boring sausage statement into a succulent, sizzled up sausage. And here I've made the statement. Well, I've not made the statement. We made the statement, actually. It's a bit more we. Now, let's read it out, but you have got it there. I've tried and tried so many times. Nothing ever seems to work out for me. I seem to always be taking 1 step forward and 2 back. I feel like giving up. So this could be some sort of internal dialogue that we have with ourselves or our people have. How do we sizzle that up to be motivating, include some self-compassion in this case, and also inspire us to take action and be motivated. So on that note, take your raw sausage and into the rooms. So is there any questions before we go in? Because I don't want to sort of put you in and you go, what are you talking about? What do you mean sizzle? No questions? Are you ready to go in the room? Have a try? So in teams.
5 minutes, breakout rooms, 6 people. That should be about right.
So you've got to go straight down to it. Okay, so right, how do we get on? Like, so team 1, did we number the teams? So anyone in breakout 1? Do you want to go first? So how did you get on, first of all? Good, brilliant. You got the best one, you're winning.
We were just getting into the sort of the work, and then we popped out. So
no, that is outrageous. No, really, it really is outrageous. Now, with the one thing about sizzling, I would say, is the longer you give them, the worse they do, right? I'm just being honest here. You've got to learn to sizzle on the spot. So you need a little bit of pressure. You probably needed more than that time, maybe 2 minutes more, but otherwise they get chatting and have a little chatette or argue over it and say, no, why do we say that? I've got a really good idea. Yeah. So the skill here is to be able to sizzle in the moment when you're actually the goal. So when you're writing an email, you can quickly assess, is this sizzled? Does it include a motive? Is it going to evoke collaboration? Is it got motive? If it doesn't, don't press send, especially to 5,000 people. Right. So so sorry about that. I think it should have been a little 2 minute longer, actually, would have cracked it. But on that note, it's improvisation. So let's hear it. Team 1.
We didn't come up with anything specific as such, but we had a couple of thoughts. So one was around just flipping the statements.
Okay, go on. Let's hear that. I'd be interested in that.
You started off by doing that, and you did it rather well.
So can we try that? It's actually, I've not had this before. It's a good idea.
How should we proceed, One?
Do you want to? Can you remember how you flipped the statement right when we first started talking?
Oh well,
Did you use an Edison Bell example?
Yep. So basically, in this work, I feel like I want to give up. I've been trying. I'll continue to try, like Thomas Edison, where I need to stay with it. I haven't found the solution yet. I won't give up, and I'm going to continue to find what works.
Love it. Love that. That's a really good idea, and that's a different take on it altogether. Like what you've done with it, and it works. It works. It's reframing, isn't it? So it's great. So well done, well done. So judges, what have we got?
I've been really listening to what Steve's saying around motive and thinking of compassion and inspiration, and I've got a score written down. But can we go through all 3?
Yeah, we can do it that way if you want.
All right, yeah, go for it. Yeah, so group 2, breakout 2.
Okay, so I think we did it, but I'm not sure. We worked collaboratively, so I just jotted it down, so that's the only reason I'm speaking. What we said was something like, I know it may be difficult to keep trying with no immediate effect. What did I learn, or what did you learn from the steps forward? How can we amplify these steps, and we can figure this out together?
Love it. Well done, you.
We
should have like an applause sound in the background. Or everybody, yeah.
There's a reaction, I think, yeah.
Love it, love it. That's really good. They're good. They're great. Remember, you only had a few minutes in there. So you can do this in a few minutes. You can do it, can't you? It's like, so team 3.
So our group, we discussed that maybe if you're trying something so many times, it's the approach that's not working. So you want to try a different approach. So I've tried so many times, nothing ever seems to work out for me for now. Because right now the approach isn't working, but in the future, if you do something in a different way, it could work in the future.
Love it. Well done. What do we think? The judges doing their thing. That was very good. I'm not a judge. I'm not allowed to judge.
Okay.
So
you
said
like...
3 groups. Sorry, I really thought there was 4. My bad.
Is there more? Sorry.
No, I think that's it. I think that's it. Has everyone had a go? No, that's fine. Sorry, James, go on.
Claire.
Oh, hello. I'm a judge as well. I'm just going to go straight. Are you going to go first, James?
Yeah, I'd like to go to breakout number 1 and say I'm giving that a 3.
A sizzle 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you giving it, Claire?
I'm going to give it a sizzle 2.5.
Oh,
I did like Edison, but I thought it needed to be a bit more structured.
Yeah,
more collaborative.
And then, what about breakout 2?
Breakout 2, I'm going to give it a 4. I thought it was sizzling. I thought it was motivating, inspiring, and use the word we a lot with collaboration. So 4.
So Caroline and team, well done, because I gave it a 4. Now I'm moving on to breakout 3, and that's a 3 for me. Claire, what did you give?
I gave that a 3 as well. I like the changing of approach.
So if there were chocolates, and if we could hand them out,
I know it's outrageous.
It
Can't
is.
eat chocolate.
But back to you, Fiona.
There's no presents. Where's the presents? You have to have the goodie bag. Yeah, so well done. So was it 2 that took it?
I thought we had a bit of a tie there. Yeah, 2.
2 that took it. Well done, team 2. Well done, go for it. But overall, did you enjoy having a go at Sizzler? It was quick, it was rapid. What thoughts on organizational language, or even not, thoughts on our own internal dialogue? What happened?
It made us think outside of the box. It challenged us to really focus on learner experience.
Amazing technique. I like that. That sizzled. She sizzled it in the chat. So it made you think outside the box. Yeah, because we're using a metaphor, obviously. It's not our metaphor. It's actually an American used to call it sizzle the steak in the 50s. I wasn't around then, just in case you're going to ask that. Right, in the 50s and 60s, and they were like the salesman. Yeah, I know he's laughing. That's terrible. So basically, they used to say sizzle, sell the sizzle, or sell the sizzle, not the steak or something, right? But we made it a sausage. Don't ask me why. Just sausage seemed a lot more interesting. And you see what I mean? We're taking like the metaphor, we're putting it over the language, we're turning the language into something that can be better understood. Raw, nasty, just raw. Who wants to eat a raw sausage? Do I want to listen to language like that? Raw? No. Does it motivate me? No. Does it inspire me? No. Do I want to hear it burn like I overdid it? No. I want it sizzled up lovely, please. So the motive, no human being does anything without a motive, end of story. That's just fact. So if we know that, we have to give them a motive to anyone we're speaking to. And if we're speaking to 5,000 people at the same time, we need to speak to 5,000 people with motive. What's in it for them to take notice? What I'm saying. What's going to make them engage, right? So it's a simple tool, but when I say it's simple, it works, right? So anyway, so I'm going to move on quickly because we're sort of running out of time, which is these sort of things, they go quite quickly. So I'm going to pass it across to Chris because James thinks we should do this last one on Broadway and have a letter Q&A at the end. So that's cool because you can always email us or something like that. So Chris, over to you, my lovely lady.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Fien, can you just give me a presentation there? So just give me the last slide after the slide just before break, the train of thought. So this is the one that says facilitating people to think for themselves. Yeah. Okay. So to kind of pick up on what we were doing with the Sizzler. So obviously what Fien was saying is that everyone needs the language that we use and the motives that we put behind that language can make all the difference in getting people on side. Now, another technique that we're going to look at is and this ties into our whole facilitating people to think for themselves, is how we give people a bit of context or a bit of leeway and then enable them to go away and apply that to a situation. So we're going to think about if you went to see a film or you went to see a play, and when a film or a play is being created, the director's job is to get the best out of those actors, get the best performance so that we can capture that and, take number 1 as opposed to 52, and obviously on stage as well. And what directors do is that rather than giving really correctional or specific prescriptive feedback, so go slower, go faster, stand like this, stand like that, they'll give the actor a bit of a context or a constraint or a role in which to improve their performance. So for example, they might say, oh, well, that was really good, but maybe you could play it like, you just said, you had your best friend just had their cat died or something, and you need to, comfort them, or you've got someone, new coming onto the team. And what happens is that what the director's doing is that because there's no criticism, the actor feels a bit more, oh yeah, I've got this. I just need to make a few little tweaks, and they go and they deliver the performance of their lives, and we all get an Oscar and everybody's happy. So how this is going to work in progress, and Fee, sorry, if you can just kind of move to my instructions real quick. And we're going to play this fast and furious, so we're going to have to be ready. So we are going to go into breakouts again, and you need to very quickly choose a team leader, a team member, a director, and then the remaining people will be your audience. And so your team leader and your team member are going to play out a scenario where the leader is going to be giving the member some correctional feedback, but they're going to be approaching it in the way that you'd normally handle any sort of a difficult conversation around performance. Maybe there was a client complaint or something like that. And then what's going to happen is they're going to play that out, and then the director is going to listen to that, and they're going to give them a constraint or a different role to step into, or a different method by which they should have that conversation again. And then they're going to repeat the conversation, and then the audience is going to then score how well they think the team leader improved upon the delivery of that feedback or that conversation from the first iteration to the second iteration. Okay, so you've got this, these instructions are on page 4 in your pre-pack. You're going to have, as I say, going to need to be quite quick picking your roles and jiving into things. And I think given the time, if we say we've got about 6 minutes for those breakouts, does that sound about right?
That should be fine. Yeah.
That should be good. Does anyone have any questions? Are you clear on what we're doing when we dive into the breakouts? No? All good? Cool. All right, let's go. No. Okay. So just to sort of pull this together in terms of our feedback. And so just firstly, I mean, what was that like? So firstly, if you were a team leader and you were the one playing out the scenario, I mean, what was that like for you going about giving feedback like this, and then giving a different parameter from the director in order to play that out?
I've been in leadership for 20 plus years, and I've never really thought about it from the perspective of rather than trying to prescribe, what you need to do, is put yourself in a place that helps them determine what needs to be done on their own. Even though I thought about, people learn on their own.
Yeah.
I never really thought about a way to help me get there. And I thought that was really eye-opening, and it was fun. Carolyn did a good job.
Oh, super. Oh, I wish I'd been in your breakout room now. That sounds fantastic. Anyone else? We've got 3 breakouts. So who else?
Hi. We didn't get quite round to getting through our second iteration after the feedback, but we did have some good discussion and pointers about how we could have framed it differently or approached it differently. So that was a good exercise, maybe a little bit longer time.
Okay. I mean, I was in the room with, I think it was Alana, who's my team leader in my room, and she was lovely and empathetic. I was like, oh my gosh, they did a super job playing it through. And Alana, what was that like for you, kind of having played it through? And then I know we didn't quite get to finish it, but then trying to put a different hat on.
No, I was very happy that we kind of, our second choice was to go for something with a little bit more emotional aspect to it and have to dig more into the more personal aspect of what was going on with the person I was giving feedback to. And that's something I in the back of my head the first time we were going around was something I wanted to do and kind of understand, you know, seek to understand what's going on with that person before even jumping into feedback and how it affects anything else. Because if they're not happy, nothing's happy.
No, that's right. That's absolutely right. Excellent. And I mean, for our team members, so I know obviously I'm a bit of a cheat. So I know Landon was our team member in that room. Landon, do you mind sort of feeding back, you know, what did you notice? What was different from one iteration to the next?
So the first one was more about just really kind of checking in and seeing what's going on and kind of directing me more so what of what I can do. But the second one was more of like just friend to friend, of course, job oriented, but really just wanted to really break down what's going on and even further of why this is happening. Okay, can you tell me more about that? And we got into, of course, it was a true story. About a month ago, I did lose my my first dog, so that was kind of a thing we're talking about. Of course, here at Chewy, the environment is all there, so it was a great environment for that. But really to break down, see what's going on, what can I do for you? Like, I'm so sorry that happened, and things like that. To really, that made me feel more welcoming, and of course, wanting to really just tell Alana more as well.
Brilliant. Fantastic result. And what about our final breakout? Was that, I can't remember if we started with 1 or 3. Who was our last team member? Oh, sorry, Fee, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, we have a few minutes left. So they just sent a warning, 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else want to feedback from a team leader perspective? Okay. And then what about our directors? Anyone want to feedback? You know, what was that like giving that type of feedback? Or giving someone a different hat to put on as they were facilitating the conversation?
In our team, we all decided to take the role of director.
Oh,
so yeah, so there was a few of us giving feedback, which I think was quite nice because then we were hearing other people's viewpoints and how they deal with feedback. So that was really interesting. So that seemed to work well. And Joe and Sue did a great job because they were pretty much thrown into it. So well done.
Excellent.
Can I just interrupt you because we've got a question in?
I was going to say, dive in.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, guys. We've got a question. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but I'm going to ask it. It's from James.
Fee, what this is a question that I'm planning to ask towards the end, yeah?
Okay, yeah, well, we're at the end, so because I'm mindful of the time. So I'm going to, has anyone got any questions? And just, we do have 5 minutes for questions. And I know James had one. Has anyone else got one?
I have a quick comment on our director piece in our skit. I really liked how the scenario played out well, but our director Catherine was able to be able to see that actually, if we got to the root cause and spending more time on that, would probably be a very helpful tool to do. So I think it was interesting for me to watch because it was well done, but then the value of having someone else see it from another perspective brought us to a much more sustainable and a deeper place.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen.
I was going to say, Fee, and do you want to just kind of wrap it up and tell them about the goodie bag and just any other questions?
I can. Yes, we had a special goodie bag as well for you guys and putting extra stuff in there. And how it works is I think you've got directions to them anyway, but you just sign up, get the goodie bag. When we've seen you in there, and obviously we can see your names, then we add something extra to it. Okay, so it's an online goodie bag, obviously, which has things like PDFs, the things like white paper. We'll be adding new stuff to it all the time, the goodie bag anyway. But it also does have in there a micro coaching program of how to design it. Experiential micro coaching, which is like what they're mind nudging. So it's one thought bias or unconscious bias at a time, right? And so that's in there. There is quite a lot of stuff in there, to be honest. There's a few activities to go and try out. But
can I share the link to that on chat?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
So yeah, I should share. Oh yes, I think Have you got the link that I sent Paula in the email today?
Yeah. Oh, no,
Okay.
not that one, an earlier one. Have I put the wrong one up? Sorry.
I'll tell you what, let me just go and grab it for you real quick.
Cool. Brilliant. Yeah. So we got any questions beyond that great breakout we've just done for our facilitators this evening? I phrased that really poorly. Come on, share your questions. Get those questions going.
I really see how the epic piece that you brought up earlier has tremendous value, because I think these exercises are powerful, but I could see an iterative value in doing them multiple times, and how the fluency of that would be rapid.
Do you know what? It's funny you should say that, because the activities are more the ignite. So we do ignite, embed, grow, sustain. So there's like 4 processes, which I didn't go through because it was too much. But there is a scalable learning thing in there as a white paper anyway, in that goodie bag. But do you know, like the ignite is, I ignite transformation. So we need the ignition, but it doesn't sustain it. Clearly not, because we go back to a behavior like default behavior within a few days, and if not hours, right? So that's where the sort of micro coaching idea happens, where you iterate through mind nudging. That is the habitual change bit. That is the bit that embeds it. So when you blend them together, you get the ignite, embed, grow, and the sustain is really the learning tribes, because they're the bit that you need to collaborate and you need to share tacit knowledge. But you sort of got a little road to get there, because you can't just open a learning tribe because no one will turn up. Or they might turn up, but they might not be engaged. So you have to get them right into the ignite transformation. What's in it for me, right? So the events are really good for that, because you need that facilitation for that. There's no real replacement for it. But the internal stuff, that mind nudging that says, it's more introspective, is habitual change. And that's the bit that has to be iterative, because there's no way around it. It's habitual change is a longer job, but it's only 1 minute a day or 2 minutes a day. So it's not about the time you need. It's more about the power of the thought and then compounding over time. So you'll get the compound effect after about a month.
So, Fee,
yeah,
I think Stephen gets the prize for the best question.
I was well impressed.
He's good.
I'm going to attempt to just get my question in the final seconds of the event. I just wanted you to indicate to us what part the virtual plays within the virtual environment of the title of the event.
You mean, really, I think I know what you mean, but I might have it wrong. So I'm going to make a big assumption. There's a game for that. Right. So basically, it's like the proof that you can do experiential learning, in a virtual environment. Is that what you meant?
I just, what difference does it make? Does it bring extra abilities, or does it? Do
you know what? I do miss a bit of face-to-face, because I like running around the stage performing. But so I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm like, so I do miss that. But it's more that physical thing. We were talking about it today, because the arms are going everywhere, because you're like, oh no, calm down. But it's a tricky one, right? Because you get more sometimes from virtual. Simply, if you're not all washed out with Zoom, that's the trouble, right? Because I used to use Zoom way before the pandemic, 2015. And I have to say, I thought it got better results. But then the pandemic came in and everyone got burnt out by Zoom. So that sort of outweighed it. Yeah. But if you imagine that you are actually more focused here. So if you're on a table and you've got 150 people in the room and they're all on different tables and all, it is a cafe style thing, isn't it? So they're around the tables, they're playing games. It's different, but you're not as connected because you may be one removed, right? Whereas here, you're in the room. Now, you could have 200 people in a Zoom, but you're running it different at that point. So, and you've got to be very, very directional, because you cannot screw that up when they go in the breakouts. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for that answer. It struck me in listening to your answer to Stephen's point that actually that iteration seems, it seems to me that the iteration is easier to go back into breakout rooms and do it again, rather than any sort of repeating stuff within a space altogether. But that was just my perception. What I'd like to do now, and you can see Fee and Chris at the moment, I'm going to commit a big sin, because what I'm going to do is remove your ability to see them. Bye-bye, Fee and Chris, in terms of the visual. I'm putting this title slide of the event back up. It's my opportunity to thank Chris and Fiona for this event, the principles for creating a learning-centered virtual environment. Much appreciated. I've myself personally benefited massively, and I think others will have as well. So a really big thank you very much, and thanks very much for that goodie bag and the access to that. Everybody, all the participants, please, could you give us feedback? Now, the address on the screen is less useful than the address that will go into chat. So go into chat and the URL will work straight off. I can see loads of chats have gone in. Has that gone in? No, Paula, have you done that?
Just sorting it out.
Yeah, Paula's going to put that SurveyMonkey link in there, and I'd just ask you to do that. While Paula's doing that, what I'd now like to do is just say, look, we've got other meetings coming, other events coming up in February, March, and May, and more information will be about available about that on Eventbrite and in the branch event emails. I'm repeating a slide earlier on just to say, please contact us if you want to win these benefits here, and come and join our little team to put on such events going forward. I'm going to now shut up just with the final words of Fee. Chris, thank you ever so much.
Yeah, Chris, have you got anything to add? No, I'd just like to say thank you very much for having us, and also for being amazing participants, I have to say.
Well done, participants. Excellent.
I've particularly enjoyed it. It's really exciting to get the opportunity to put this learning in front of other learning and development professionals like yourself, and getting just hearing your insights and your feedbacks. I've really appreciated it. It's been fantastic.
So this is moving into a sort of post-event chat. So if you're a participant and the bewitching hour has arrived, the budget is spent, if you need to get off to your next appointment, go and make dinner, whatever it is, feel free. The event officially is over.